When my 12-year-old son Ben agreed to shovel snow for our wealthy neighbor Mr. Dickinson for $10 a day, he was overjoyed. His plan was simple: earn enough money to buy thoughtful gifts for the family. But when Mr. Dickinson refused to pay, calling it a lesson in contracts, Ben was devastated. That's when I decided it was time for a lesson of our own, a lesson in accountability. Ben had always had a heart bigger than his years. At just 12, his determination could humble grown men. Still, I never imagined I'd be standing with my husband in the freezing cold, enacting a plan to teach our neighbor that cheating a child wasn't just bad business. It was personal. "Mom, Mr. Dickinson said he'll pay me $10 every time I shovel his driveway." His face was glowing with pride. Mr. Dickinson, our insufferably wealthy neighbor, was known for his arrogance. He reveled in flaunting his luxurious lifestyle, from the sleek sports cars in his garage to the extravagant holiday parties in his mansion. Letting Ben shovel his driveway was probably, in his mind, some sort of charitable gesture. "That's fantastic, sweetheart," I said, tousling his hair. "What are you going to do with all that money?" Ben's expression grew serious. One of those rare moments when childhood excitement gives way to a glimpse of maturity. "I'm going to buy you a scarf and a dollhouse for Annie." By December 23rd, Ben was a well-oiled machine of winter labor. That morning, he left the house humming a Christmas carol. I went about my day, expecting him to return as usual, tired but triumphant. But when the door slammed open an hour later, I knew something was wrong. "Ben," I called out, rushing from the kitchen. He stood by the door, his boots half on, his gloves still clenched in his trembling hands. His shoulders heaved, and tears clung to the corners of his wide, panicked eyes kneeled beside him, gripping his arms. "Sweetheart, what happened?" He wouldn't talk at first, but eventually he told me everything that M.R. Dickinson. He said he's not paying me a single cent. The words hung in the air, heavy as a stone. "What do you mean, he's not paying you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Ben sniffled, his face crumpling. He said it's a lesson, that I should never accept a job without a contract. His voice cracked, and the tears spilled over. "Mom, I work so hard. I just don't understand. Why would he do this?" Anger surged through me, sharp and blinding. What kind of person cheats a child as a business lesson? I pulled Ben into a hug, pressing my hand against his damp hat. "Oh, baby," I murmured. "It's not your fault. You did everything right. This is on him, not you." I pulled back, brushing his hair from his face. "You don't worry about this, okay? I'll take care of it." I stood, grabbed my coat, and stormed across the lawn. The sight of Dickinson's house, glowing with holiday cheer, only stoked my fury. Laughter and music spilled into the cold night as I rang the doorbell. He appeared moments later, wineglass in hand, his tailored suit making him look like a villain straight out of a bad movie. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice oozing false charm. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I think you know why I'm here," I said evenly. "Ben earned that money. You owe him $80. Pay him." He chuckled, shaking his head. "No contract, no payment. That's how the real world works." I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm. I opened my mouth to argue about fairness and the cruelty of his supposed lesson, but the look in his eyes told me none of that would persuade him to do the right thing. No! There was only one way to deal with the Mr. Dickinsons of the world. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Dickinson. The real world is about holding people accountable." My smile was so sweet it could have rotted teeth. "Enjoy your evening." As I walked away, an idea began to form. By the time I stepped back and ate our house, I knew exactly what had to be done. The next morning, while Dickinson and his guests still slept, I woke the household with a determined clap of my hands. "Time to go, team," I said. Ben groaned as he crawled out of bed, but caught the determined gleam in my eye. "What are we doing, Mom?" "We're righting a wrong." Outside, the air was bitter and still. My husband started the snowblower, the rumble cutting through the early quiet. Ben grabbed his shovel, gripping it like a sword. Even Annie, too small for the heavy work, bounced along in her boots, ready to help. We began with our driveway, then moved to the sidewalk, clearing paths for the neighbors. The pile of snow grew steadily as we pushed it all toward Dickinson's pristine driveway. The cold bit at my fingers, but the satisfaction of each shovelful fueled me. Ben paused to catch his breath, leaning on his shovel. "This is a lot of snow, Mom," he said, a smile creeping onto his face. "That's the point, honey," I said, piling another scoop onto the growing mountain. "Think of it as a reverse Christmas miracle." Annie giggled as she pushed tiny mounds of snow with her toy shovel. "Mr. Grumpy's not going to like this," she chirped. By mid-morning, Dickinson's driveway was buried under a fortress of snow. It was higher than the hood of Dickinson's sleek black car. I dusted off my gloves, stepping back to admire our handiwork. "That," I said, "is a job well done." It wasn't long before he noticed. Soon, Dickinson stormed over, his face as red as the Christmas lights on his roof. "What the hell have you done to my driveway?" he bellowed. I stepped outside, brushing off my gloves like I had all the time in the world. "Oh, Mr. Dickinson, this is a little something called quantum meruit." "Quantum what?" His eyes narrowed, his confusion almost comical. "It's a legal concept," I explained with a smile. "It means if you refuse to pay for someone's labor, you lose the right to enjoy the benefit of it. Since you didn't pay Ben, we simply undid his work. Fair's fair. Wouldn't you agree?" Dickinson sputtered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You can't do that." I gestured toward the neighbors who had gathered to watch, their smiles thinly veiled. "Actually, I can, and if you'd like to call a lawyer. Keep in mind that I have plenty of witnesses who saw you exploit a minor for free labor. That wouldn't look great for someone like you, now would it?" He glared at me, then at the crowd, realizing he'd lost. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stomped back to his house. By evening, the doorbell rang again and there stood Dickinson, holding an envelope. He didn't look me in the eye as he handed it over. "Tell your son I'm sorry," he mumbled. I closed the door and handed the envelope to Ben. Inside were 8 crisp $10 bills. Ben's smile was worth more than all the money in the world. "Thanks, Mom," he said, hugging me tight. "No," I whispered, ruffling his hair. "Thank you for showing me what real determination looks like."